We're gonna have to start off with the Chiefs winning a close one against the Raiders on Monday night, and that was a definitely a crazy game. I going into it, didn't expect it to end up so close, but Chiefs did get the victory, 32-29.
Yeah, so previewing this game, I thought, at best we get a shootout because it's two high-powered offenses. But the way the two teams have kind of played and looked, which the Raiders haven't looked bad. All their losses have been close, including this one. But I thought the Chiefs are probably going to make it look a little more dominant than this one turned out to be. The Raiders started up 17-0, kind of stuttered for a little while, tried to fight back, and then ended up going for two at the end, missing it. They lose by 1 point. So Patrick Mahomes goes 29 for 43, gets himself about 300 yards. There's 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, and then also rushed 4 times for 28 yards. We don't see him run that much. So that's not like crazy or anything, but it's a little out of the zone for Patrick. Then Jarrett McKinnon is actually the one who led in rushing with 53 yards. Little running back, very shifty runs, kind of just cutting through the Raiders defense all night. Marquez Valdez-Scantling and McCole Hardman had huge receiving days, 90 and 73 yards each for the two of them. But it's Travis Kelce who pulled in all 4 touchdowns on only 7 receptions for just 25 yards. So he just absolutely dominated the red zone. Really didn't see much out of him until they got down right within that red zone. Two of those right on the goal line, and Patrick Mahomes finds his favorite target. For the Raiders, Derek Carr goes 19 for 30, 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. Pretty good day for him. But speaking of good days, Josh Jacobs, 21 carries, 151 yards, and a touchdown. He was just dominating that game. Probably could have been given a few more touches, though he does get the chance on that 2 point conversion where they end up missing. He comes up just short. So, you know, good and bad of a game. Devontae Adams put up crazy numbers. 3 receptions for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. One of those touchdowns is a 58-yard touchdown. The other is a 48, and his other reception was obviously pretty big as well. Just a huge day for him, despite the low receptions. Also has a big day when you look at penalties. He has 2 big pass interference calls called on him, against him. I don't figure out how to word this. Anyway, he's trying to make the reception. Receiver or defenders make some really bad plays, especially the rookie one in the end zone, and they gained some big yardage. That's one of their touchdowns comes from that one. Overall, though, the Raiders just didn't look as good in the second half. They kind of put up a good fight at the end, but they end up falling to 1-4 now after they go for it on a 2 point conversion. There's 4 minutes left in the game. You can tie it and just try to do something with defense, which I know your defense hasn't looked good all game really. But they go for it for the two. They miss it, barely miss it. He almost gets in, and they just end up losing that game. But it's interesting to look at because the Chiefs also go for two at the end of their last drive, and they miss, which gives the Raiders the perfect opportunity to just tie it or win it with the 2 point call. I don't think it's as egregious as the Ravens one, but I do think it comes down to being a pretty bad call. I think you just have to tie it and really put some faith in your defense.
Yeah, so I'll get to all of the things you just mentioned. You want to start off with the Raiders' offense looked really good to start off. I mean, they were running the ball really well. Josh Jacobs was going crazy. I mean, it seemed like every run he got was doggone 10 yards almost. So, I mean, there weren't really that many runs where he didn't get anything. So, the running game was really good. I mean, Derek Carr, he was good throwing the ball, but it was really the running game that was leading that offense to start off. But, of course, their first touchdown was that huge bomb to Devontae Adams on fourth down. Derek Carr gets, a running start. He gets it all the way down to Devontae. They score a touchdown there. And that's after the Chiefs offense really couldn't do much of anything because they were getting a lot of pressure on Mahomes early on in the game. Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, of course, on that defensive line. So we really didn't see much from the Chiefs early on. And this wasn't necessarily one of those games where it's like one team in the first half does everything, and then the second half they can't do anything. It's vice versa for the other team, but definitely more of a game of a tale of two halves. The Raiders pretty much dominated the first half for the most part until the Chiefs finally caught fire on offense in the second half and were able to put up most of their points at that point in the second. But we would be remiss if we didn't mention, the penalties in this game. So Devontae Adams had an interesting game. I mean, he didn't have that many catches as you mentioned, but 2 touchdowns. He had a bobble on a third down, which could have gave him a first later in the game. He had the 2 drawn pass interference penalties, and then the very last play of the game for the Raiders, him and Hunter Renfro collided. So even though he didn't like have 10 catches, I mean, he was pretty important in this game one way or the other. So both of those pass interferences, just a few plays away from each other on the same drive. Uh, First one going to the sideline, he draws a pass interference by trying to basically go back to the ball. Same thing happens in the end zone, which gets them down at the one, of course. And this is a penalty that we see quite a lot more often now, where if it's an underthrown ball, QB underthrows it, the receiver, they're trying to come back to it. The defender never even turns around and they run into the receiver, of course. That's going to be a penalty every time. And while some people can argue, like, it's kind of a bailout because if you throw a ball under, whether it's intentional or not, if you throw a ball under and all the receiver has to do is come back, and of course the defender's not even going to know that the ball's right behind them and the receiver's trying to run into him, basically get to it, knowing they're not going to be able to catch the ball anyway. It could be seen as a bailout, but I mean, it is a smart play if you're a receiver, to try to make that catch. And Devontae was able to draw two penalties on him on those two plays. So I mean, that contributes just as much as if he had caught the balls. So either way, definitely contributed there, which led to the score at the end of that drive. But there was a roughing the passer penalty, which should have given the ball to the Chiefs. Instead, they call roughing the passer. The drive continues for the Raiders, and that was yet again another horrible roughing the passer penalty. I really don't know what the refs are thinking right there because they keep bringing up the whole body weight thing, which I sort of understand, but tell me this. I want to hear your opinion on it. Like, what do you think the refs want them to really do? Because I really don't understand what a defender's supposed to do if they're trying to make a tackle. And he can knock the ball out before he even went to the ground anyway. So if you're a defender trying to make a tackle, like, what exactly are you supposed to do?
Yeah, see, I think like on paper, right, and the way the penalty is worded, right, you want to keep you don't want to put all of your body weight onto the quarterback. I think that makes sense, and I think that's fair enough. But when we watch these calls, especially these ones that have been controversial, and this week we've had two. This one with Derek Carr, he punches the ball out of his hand so that he's no longer holding the ball. Really, it's supposed to be a fumble. He not only doesn't come all the way down on him, but he actually slides to the side, and most of his body weight misses Derek Carr. I mean, it's a hard slam, sure, but a sack is usually hard. I've seen worse. I've You've probably heard so far throughout the season. I do like the Dolphins. I've watched Tua get like his brain rocked out of him twice this season. Neither of those calls were called roughing the passer, and I think those maybe could have been. But it's just I don't know. I think there's good intentions behind it. I believe yes, obviously, especially for like a D lineman who's like 300 pounds of muscle, you should not have him slamming all of his body weight on a QB who's not going to be that big, not prepared to take that kind of hit. But a lot of the times, these guys aren't putting that much weight on them. They're fair. They're clean hits. They're coming in, and I don't know. I can't really see what the refs are going for here. When you call a call like that one, it's gonna encourage people to play very weirdly. They're not gonna want to be physical. Um, and I don't like really the argument that the NFL is getting super soft. I think we still play a pretty good physical game, but I mean with these kind of calls, it's hard to say like, well, that's not that's soft. Like that should have been a fumble. The Chiefs should have got the ball. Luckily for Chiefs fans, they come out with a win in this game. But it's just, I mean, the Falcons can't say the same, and they had a very similar thing. The sack on Tom Brady is just a regular sack. I can't look at that and be like, ooh, he really did too much there. I don't know. And if anything, during the play on Derek Carr, the guy kind of slides up the way, tries to land normally, and another Chiefs defender thinks that Derek still has the ball and comes in and like punches him. And even then, that wasn't like he didn't like falcon punch him. He just kind of swung his hand towards him if there was a ball there, and that's still really not roughing the passer. I don't know. I think a great way to look at the disparity is we have I don't know if it's called the same thing, I can't remember, but when they call for people hitting the kicker like after they kick something like the roughing the kicker, is it called that?
Yeah, you get roughing and then you just get running into it, and those are the two different ones. So running is just obviously the accidental.
Yeah.
That's just like 5 yards, but if it's 15, if you rough them.
Yeah, I've never seen a bad call for that one. Like that's always like pretty legit. They hit him in the leg, they knock him down or something. There's usually egregious force there, whether it be accidental or purposeful. It's there, but there's a lot of roughing the passers, right? I look at it and I'm like, I don't see much more than a regular sack here. And there've been some where I look at it, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And, he might not have meant to do that, but that was bad. Like that's clearly roughing the passer. There's been some bad stuff like that, but I don't know. Recently, we've just had a lot of ones that just don't amount to that. We had one in the Bucks game, we had one in the Raiders game, we had one in the Alabama game a few weeks ago. I It's a really weird situation. I think we need to ease up on this. The refs need to be more careful. And I actually had a discussion about this with someone else today. But I think the problem with this call is that it's subjective, right? A face mask call is a face mask call. They grabbed his face mask, boom, penalty. Horse collar, same thing. Offsides, false start, all these things. You can pretty much see it and be like, yep, that's it. But there's ref in the passer, man. It's just kind of like if that ref decides that one time, ooh, that looked a little bad to me. And that's pretty much it. It's a really I don't like it. I don't like where this call has been heading, and I hope that in lieu of this week, we'll get some clarity here, especially because with the one with Tom Brady, that same ref, when asked, the guy said, "Well, Tua took a harder hit recently, and one in a similar manner, but a little harder, of course. Do you think that would have called?" And the ref was like, "No, I don't really think they're exactly the same." And so I just don't get it. I don't see the mindset. I don't see where we're going, and I really hope we can get some clarity here and have this kind of play stop happening.
Well, the refs are always going to cover their behinds when they make a bad call. I mean, they're not going to admit that they did something wrong. So that's number one. Yeah, I mean, the Tom Brady one, I mean, you couldn't even argue that he hit his head because he actually didn't. So, I
Yeah.
mean, and if he did hit his head, it wasn't even like intentional. It's not like he slung him directly on his head. I mean, that's just kind of how it ended up. And if he had let him go, not like Tom Brady is like going to get up and speed away, but I mean, you don't just give up on a tackle or whatever. I mean, just wait till you get them to the ground and you hear the whistle. That's why they always say play to the whistle. So, but besides the roughing the passer, you get later into the game and the Chiefs offense finally starts to wake up. I mean, they did have a missed field goal earlier, but then they end up making a longer field goal uh, at the end of the half. We got the entire stadium chanting "Rush, you suck," which is hilarious because the Chiefs fans, they were not having it after the roughing the passer call. I mean, they were booing for the next like because that was near the end of the half. So I mean, they were booing for the entire end of the half pretty much. So they were not happy. But the Chiefs at least put up some more points or whatever going into half, and then they come out afterwards, and their offense finally starts to kick into gear, and you get like you mentioned, touchdown after touchdown to Travis Kelsey, and the Raiders offense. At this point, they only put up 9 points for the rest of the game. And not to say that the Raiders offense, sputtered, but they obviously weren't nearly as good as they were in the first half. Josh Jacobs was still able to run, and it's not like the game was ever out of control either. So they were still able to stick to the running game. I mean, even on the last drive of the game, they still kept to the running game. At least for the first couple plays or so. So it's not as if the Raiders offense just died. And I think they could continue to have this kind of offense going forward. And considering Darren Waller was out for like pretty much the entire game, uh, I don't imagine that they'll, you know, pass 20 times a game or something, 20 times or like 15, something like that. But if you're able to run the ball like they did, I think that's something they could definitely do a lot more of rather than just trying to throw the ball every time, even though you do have a top tier tight end and a top tier wide receiver. So moving on a little bit further into the game, we do get near the end, and the Chiefs they end up finally, you know, taking over, and they decide to go for it. Uh, you can argue whether or not they should have done that, but they went for it. They're going to try to go up. At that point, it would have been 9 points. If they kicked the extra point, it would have just been eight. Which, see, that's what the dilemma is for me because if you're going to go up eight anyway, I mean, you have to force them. You're forcing them to go for two anyway, if for the Raiders. So I always tend to be more conservative in this kind of situations for me, but they went for it. Instead, they only go up 7 points now. So whenever the Raiders come back down and they score, instead of tying for them, which in hindsight, is it's a bad call, but I guess considering at that point, since their defense really hadn't done much to stop the Chiefs in the second half, really the last part of the first half on to the end of the game, you can say you should trust your defense, but I mean, being realistic, they probably couldn't at that point. So I do understand wanting to just go for two, but not doing it costs you because now you're down 1 point. So now you're going to have to get the ball back rather than being able to play for overtime if possible. So, and you get that end play where Devontae and Renfro run into each other. And that's rough. And then at that point, you're kind of wondering, like, maybe we shouldn't have gone for it and just kicked the extra point.
Yeah, at the end of the game is it's a little weird for both teams. I think had the Chiefs just kicked the extra point there, went up 8, then we would be talking a little differently because then it's like, well, they did what they had to. They came up a little short. It is what it is. Instead, the Chiefs miss on their 2 point conversion. They open up the door for the Raiders to kind of give a cutthroat win there. And they try. I think everything about it is like that's why I said I think it's less egregious than the Ravens on night because the Ravens there's no need for them to do that. But with the Raiders, I mean, a field goal's still going to beat them. So at least do your best if you can force the turnover after you go out for go for the 2 point conversion, you get the win. Or if you can just hold the defense, hold the offense down, it's a good call. The play call is great. Josh Jacobs has been great all day from the inside run and from the outside run. So I don't see much wrong with it other than that it comes up short. That's what the problem is. But then they get another shot at it, and well, they almost get into field goal range. They call the catch back because of it, not a catch. He was not exactly fully in possession of it. I think that one was a little close, but I can agree with the pullback of it. Anyway, they get another chance, and then instead of going for let's just get the first down, trying to run out of bounds or something, they go for the deep shot, which has been working, and then Renfro and Adams collide with each other on a crossing route, and Adams is severely angry afterwards, and the game falls apart, and they fall to 1-4. One of the best looking teams in the league until you look at their record. I mean, you got Adams, who's like top 10 in receiving. You have Jacobs, who's top 10 rushing. Max Crosby is tied for first with sacks, and they're 1-4. So it really hurts, I'm sure, for the Raiders to go in there. And I think when we see these two teams meet up again later in Las Vegas, we may see a more fired up Las Vegas team because this one's going to be weighing on their mind. There's a lot of things they could have done to win this game. Maybe not let off the gas in the second half. Even if your defense starts to crumble and you start scoring, as long as you keep scoring, you've already got the lead on them. Just keep the deficit. But a lot of missed opportunities for the Raiders in this game, and I think this was easily winnable, much like many of their losses were this year. And I don't know. This is not what I expected out of this Raiders team, especially when they got Devontae Adams. I know they've been down with Darren Waller, but Josh Jacobs has really woken up, and Devontae Adams is really starting to get comfortable with Derek Carr in some ways. But yeah, this is a little weird. I think Hunter Renfro is sliding. I think he needs to get back into a comfortable area. I can't really say who the collision was on out of the two of them, so I'm not going to blame Renfro or Adams. I could equally put the blame on both of them. But Renfro's had some key fumbles, so he just hasn't looked as good as he has been. And I get it. Adams is there now. He's no longer the top dog, but things don't look super good for them. And the Chiefs, on the other hand, still look great. After a scary first half, they come back and remind us who they were, and Travis Kelce just dominates the red zone and looks like prime Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely hard to say exactly who that play was on when they collided. NFL experts on TV probably know better than us. The guys that played know routes better. But yeah, I mean Renfro, it's been kind of rough. I mean he had the 2 fumbles in that game against the Cardinals, that one being returned for a touchdown, and then that's where he also got concussed, and he had been out the past couple of weeks. So yeah, definitely kind of a rough stretch for him. But it's weird to say, oh, a 1-14 can turn around, but the parts where they played really good in this game, Josh Jacobs running the deep shots to Devontae. Obviously, Darren Waller should be back at some point, and again, Hunter Renfro should be kind of getting back in the swing of things after missing those weeks. They can turn it around, but you wanted to win this game because now 1-4. I mean, it's going to be kind of rough, especially in the AFC where I mean it's pretty much chaos over there right now.